Okay, so continuing from what we did last week, we just had to review. We had to review one svara, and once we review that, then we're going to need that to help for these next two gemaras. Okay, so just to review, all right? Not the business of being Korea, but the first gemara. So the gemara again said in the beginning of the gemara there, Hani Yud Ches Keneged Me, right? It's Chav Ches Samabeis in Brachos. So the Gemara wants to know the 18 brachos that we say, what's a keneged, right? And the Gemara gave 3 possibilities. Is it keneged the azkaros, the shemos Hashem that we find in Tehillim? Is it keneged the 18 shemos Hashem that we find in Kriya Shema, or is it based on the 18 vertebrae? Okay. So now let's put aside. Someone mentioned last time, which is correct. Let's put aside the question of the accuracy of how many vertebrae we have. It's a separate question. But the main idea we wanted to say was that basically that they were searching for, when they were structuring the template of tefillah, okay, so they searched for certain I'd say foundations that exist outside of the actual tefillah that was written. In other words, for instance, Tehillim. So what's Tehillim? Tehillim really contains Shevach, Bakasha, and Hodah. If you look at the parak that's referenced there, which is parak Chav Tes, so that parak, Rashi explains right off the bat that the beginning of it talks about Avos and then Gvuros. The whole parak is actually set up as Shevach, Bakasha, and Hodah. But those themes exist throughout Tehillim. Tehillim is really personified by the 3 ideas of Shevach, Bakasha, and Hodah. Over and over again, we see David HaMelech doing this. So one source for one theme of tefillah can be found in Tehillim. Another theme of tefillah can be found in Kriya Shema, because Kriya Shema contains the Ikari Emunah, not Yud Gimel Ikarim, but the basic fundamentals that are necessary in order for you to engage in tefillah. For instance, Kabbalah Al Mulchot Shemayim, recognizing God as Melech, recognizing God as Echad. You need those ideas in order to be able to enter into the realm of tefillah. And the last possibility, which we wanted to posit, was that really the spine really reflects an ikar notion of tefillah, which is the idea of being omed lifnei Hashem. In other words, what makes the Shmona Esrei different than any other type of tefillah is that it requires, I'm not saying it's ma'akev, but there's an idea of being omed lifnei Hashem, because you see on an airplane you don't have to do it, but point is, in the paradigm tefillah, a person stands before God. It represents a certain status that man has, that he's able to stand before God. So being omed is an actual integral part of the very experience of the Amida. It's called Amida. It's a very integral part of the whole phenomenon of Shemona Esrei. Okay? Now, with that said, now comes a problem. Okay? A very funny problem. So the Gemara says, this. The Gemara says, you're telling me 18, right? But one second, there's 19 brachas. Okay? So what's the 19th bracha? All right, what's the 19th bracha? So I assume we're all familiar with this. The 19th bracha is Birchas Aminim. Okay, Birchas Hatzidukim. So Gemara says, Amar of Levi, Birchas Hatzidukim biyavne tiknua. Okay, now it's interesting. If you look at Rashi in biyavne tiknua says la'achar zman meruba. So what he's telling you is that what happened was that you had the 18 brachas. A certain period of time went by, a significant period of time, and then they added in this extra bracha. Now, on a side note, it's interesting. Today we still refer to it as Shmona Esrei. No one really calls it the 19 brachas. So I don't want to get into. It's a separate. In fact, the very next Gemara gets into a little bit of it, but I don't want to get into the whole. What right did Chazal have to institute an extra bracha? First of all, the question in of itself is not a really good question, because they created 18 to begin with. So you could ask, what right do they have to create 18 brachas? Once you create 18, what's wrong with 19? But the real issue here, though, is that the 19th bracha is treated a little bit differently because of the fact that it was added in later on. In other words, you see that over and over again, the Gemara refers to Shmona Esrei as Shmona Esrei, meaning 18 brachas. It kind of ignores that 19th bracha, even though it's part of Shmona Esrei. So the Gemara, so what's the raya? So look what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, fine, very nice. So you're right, you have 19 brachas. So now what? So the Gemara says, it's very funny. The Gemara says, Keneged mi tiknua. So the Gemara has the same question. In other words, what is this 19th bracha keneged? Okay, when they created this extra bracha, where do they find the source for it? Okay, where do they search to find the source? So the Gemara, in a very familiar way, says, "Oh, very simple. Amrav Levi, Reb Hillel, Braid, Rav Shmuel, Bar Nachmani, Keneged, Kela Kavod Hareim," right? Which is in that parak in Tehillim. Okay, or Rav Yosef, Keneged Echad Sheba Kriya Shema. So according to Rav Yosef's position, who said it's the 18 names of God that you find in Kriya Shema, he says it's the Keneged, the Echad that's in Kriya Shema, right? That the term Echad. And then you have Rav Tanchum, Rav Yishmael Levi, what about according to him? Keneged Choya Katana Sheba Shidra. So that's basically like the butt bone, like the last of the vertebrae, right? That's at the bottom of the spine. Okay? So what question would you ask on this? Or is there a question to ask on this? I would think yes, but what question would you ask? Anyone? Does this all make sense? Because last position says that what's the 19th bracha keneged? It's keneged the choya katana. Okay? So let me ask you a question. Manashach, is that one of the vertebrae or not? Right? Is it one of the vertebrae or is it not one of the vertebrae? You know what I mean? Okay, but you don't have to apologize. Vertebrae has to do with tefillah because what we were saying before was that it's that the Yud Ches is connected to the Yud Ches, the 18 vertebrae in the spine. So the question is, why are we talking about the spine? Right? Who cares about the spine? So what we want to say was, there are two possibilities we gave, but the second possibility we gave was that the spine is what you require to be able to stand up. Without a spine, you can't stand. It's what keeps you upright. So the idea of the spine, I mean, there's obviously other functions, but the idea of the spine here is to reflect the notion that man is omed lifnei Hashem, that one of the essential features of the experience of Shemona Esrei is being omed. So now, if I were like a skeptic, I would look at this Gemara and say, okay, well now Chazal like kind of backed into a corner, and they have to kind of like force some sort of like way of justifying this 19th bracha, right? Now suddenly they bring up the Choya Katana. What's the Choya Katana? Manashach. Is it one of the vertebrae or not? You know what I mean? I emphasize that Rashi for a reason. What Rashi's telling you is that it wasn't part of the original equation. Rashi says la'achar zman meruba. Why is he telling that to you? I think he's telling that to you to let you know that this was not part of the original equation. But now they realize they want to add in a 19th bracha. They just can't add in a 19th bracha. They had to make sure it fits in some way to the original blueprint of the 18. Okay, so they have to search for the same thing. But let's just push that. Let's get rid of that point, or let's say get rid of it. I mean, let's just answer that one issue. In other words, this was a reactionary bracha. It was a bracha that was set up specifically because there was a certain problem that existed during that period of time. Forget if it exists today or not. And the next Gemara actually takes up a very famous halachic issue, which is that if someone gets up, if a shliach tzibur gets up, if he makes a mistake in any one of the other brachos, it's not a big deal. You don't yank him off the stage. But if he makes a mistake by Brachos Hatzidukim, which is V'la Malshanim, if he makes a mistake there, you take the cane and you remove him from the position of being a shliach tzibur. Okay. So if I wanted to kind of give it like a basic, like I won't say definition, but like a shame, I'd say that the 19th bracha was like a reactionary bracha. It was a bracha that really came about as a reaction to certain events and a certain situation that presented itself. Okay, but we have to be careful. That doesn't mean that this is what's key. It doesn't mean it doesn't belong in Shemona Esrei. Do you know what I mean? It has to fit in. In other words, the ideas that are expressed in V'la Malshanim, those ideas were true regardless whether or not they were actually included into Amida. It's just that Amida formalized those ideas. In other words, Amida, the Shemona Esrei went ahead and said, now it's not enough just to know that this is true, but we have to actually formalize it as a bakasha. But of course, we want God to, we're Mavakesh Agav L'Mashim Al Sikva. That's a reality. It's just saying originally Chazal saw no need for this bracha to be included in Shemon Esrei, but a certain situation presented itself, and as a reaction to the situation, they decided to be Misaki in this bracha and add it into Shemon Esrei. Okay, so and there's a lot more to be said about it, but the Gemara is saying that Chazal now, it's almost like they're trapped, like, oh, garbage, like we messed up, so now what? So we're going to have to figure out some way to finagle the bracha into the system. That's what it seems like on the surface. It's another good question, which is that why do they have to do this? Why does the Gemara even have to go into the Keneged? Just say, listen, it's they were instituting this bracha and that's it. Okay, but what is Keneged telling us? Forget what the Kenegeds are. The very fact that the Gemara and Chazal make use of Keneged must be telling us what about this bracha. So in Kriya Shema, we see the name of God, meaning Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, or Elokim, 18 times. Right? 18 times we see the Shem Hashem. Correct? Right? Oh. So what's the Gemara telling you by saying Echad? Say it again. So let me just repeat it one more time, then I'll answer that question. Okay. In other words, the main point I'm trying to say here is that the different drushas that are used here of the Kenegeds by the 19th bracha are showing you an interesting idea. They're going back to the original sources that they found the 18. And then it seems like on the surface they're trying to push an idea through, but they're not. They're saying that if you look at, for instance, Kriya Shema, you see that Echad is used. And what's Echad? Echad is an idea about that God is one, He's not physical, etc. Now, that is, in a sense, that is involved in the same objective as the Shem Hashem. In other words, if I say the Shem Hashem, I recognize as a reality that God, in the Shem Hashem itself, that God is one. Echad is another way of achieving that objective, but without using the Shem Hashem, so it's indirect. So that kind of tension, or for instance, the same tension that exists by the chulya, the tiny one, which is that on the one hand it is part of the spine, on the other hand it's not primarily responsible for helping the person stand up. Forget their knowledge of anatomy. That's their intention in saying this. What that's showing you is that's really telling you the idea of the 19th bracha. Now, just to answer that question that was raised like this, you see like this. In other words, the 18 brachos, they were reactionary, but not in the same way as the Brachos at Sidukim. What happened was that the base of Mikdash was destroyed. So now, if you didn't have a system of karbanos, there would be no mechanism whatsoever of man to engage in avoda. That's it. Avoda, the destruction of the base of Mikdash, closed the door to avoda. So that's an internal threat to the existence of Klal Yisrael. So they were koveya, a system of tefillah, and again, it's always that tefillah always mimics karbanos. They were koveya that as to ensure that Bnei Yisrael would still be able to engage in avoda. But that's not the 19th bracha. The 19th bracha is an external threat. The external threat is that Sidukim were trying to destroy the system. So to combat the external threat, they instituted this bracha. Okay, but that's a different kind of reaction. In other words, a reaction to an external threat, it would seem like, I'm just saying, based on the Gemara's logic, it occupies a lower tier. It's part of the very structure of the Shemon Esrei, but at the same time, it occupies a lower tier because of the way it was formulated. It came about through a different means. But you just can't just because Chazal want to add a bracha doesn't mean they can. Notice, what do? They go back to the original source, the blueprint of the Shemona Esrei to begin with. So the Gemara's question now is as follows. The Gemara says, okay, we know who the Yud Ches is Keneged me. Okay, we did that already. Now we're just going to do this whole Gemara. We're going to go through all three cases first, and then we're going to go back and define this. Okay, this is an amazing piece of Gemara. Really amazing piece of Gemara. The Gemara says, what about the Sheva Brachos we say on Shabbos? Because as you know, we don't say 18 Brachos on Shabbos, right? We say 7, right? There's 7 Brachos we say on Shabbos. In other words, and what does that mean, by the way? It means we have the three Brachos Shabach, right? Then we have one bracha in the middle, right? Mekadesh Shabbos, and then we have the 3 brachos by Hodah. Okay? Clear? Okay? So that's that. Okay, so the question is, what's the 7 Keneged? So the Gemara says, Amar Rachav Lifta ben Shaul, Keneged Shiva Kolos, Sh'amar David Alamayim. Interesting. Now, you got to be careful here. The Gemara again goes back to which parak in Tehillim? Chav Tes. And there, what do we see? Kol Hashem Alamayim. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Tehillim, right? That's the one that everyone sings when you take the Sefer Torah back to the Aron, right? So there's 7 mentions of Kol Hashem, right? The voice of God that exists in that parak of Tehillim. So that's where they get the 7 brachos from. Okay, that's one. Next, Hani Teisha. The Rosh Hashanah Keneged Me. What about the 9 brachos on Rosh Hashanah? Again, what do you have? You have the 3 Brachos HaShevach, right? You have the 3 brachos, 1 Malchios, 1 Zichronos, 1 Shofros, and then you have the 3 brachos of Hodah. Okay, so who's a Keneged? So Amar of Yitzchak Diman Kartignan, right? Keneged Tisha Azkaros, okay? She'amra Chana B'Tfilasa, okay? It's Keneged the 9 Shem Hashem, 9 references to God that Chana said in her special tefillah. Okay, the Amar. Now here's the key thing: Berosh Hashanah Nifkeda. Now Nifkeda means was remembered. Okay, we see that by the laning on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Ba'Hashem Pakada Sarah. That God remembered Sarah. And what Haftorah do we lane on the first day of Rosh Hashanah? Chana. Okay, so that's one of the big theme in Rosh Hashanah is Pekida / Zechira. So the Rosh Hashanah Nifkeda Sarah Rachel V'Chana. Okay, so that's number 2. So we have the 7 brachos of Shabbos or Keneged, the 7. The last one is now Hani Esrim V'Arba the Tanisa Keneged Me. Okay, so when you have a true tinus, okay, like a tinus, let's say tinus Geshem. All right, like the Gemara Tanis talks about. So they would actually say a total of 24 brachos. Okay, 24 brachos total. Okay, we don't do that today, but that's what we don't have those kind of tinios today. But I'm saying that's what they would do. Okay, so there'd be 24 brachos. So what's that like? Okay, so Amar of Chelbo Keneged Chav Dalad Renanos Sha'amar Shlomo B'Shah Shehechnis Aron LeBeis Kadshe Kadsha. Now, okay. So this is Keneged of 24. Now, Renanos here means tefillah. There was 24 tefillahs. Rashi says, Rina tefillah tchina. All right, these are all different types of prayers. Okay, different prayers. There were 24 different prayers that Shlomo enunciated. Why? Okay, because what happened was like this. Okay, and I don't care about the story. Don't ask me right now about what happened. I don't want to go into it now. But what happened was that at the time that Shlomo Melech was bringing the Beis HaMikdash into its operational role, at the climax of it, what happened was that he got the Aron and he wanted to put the Aron into the Beis HaMikdash, but the gates of the Beis HaMikdash were glued shut. Okay, they were stuck to each other. Okay, so which would not allow passage of the Aron into the Beis HaMikdash. So what did Shlomo do? He engaged in these 24 renanos, and because of that, the sha'arim were were unglued. Okay, and Rashi says, that's a key thing. Keep that in mind. That he had to ask for mercy from God. I forget why. That's irrelevant. Okay, forget what happened. I'm not interested in how the gates were stuck together, etc. Irrelevant. For now, just know that Shlomo Melech engaged in these special 24 tefillahs to vakesh rachamim. Okay, so the Gemara says, really? So hachi kol yoma nami namrinu. Okay, one second. So why don't we say 24 brachos every day of tefillah, right? And you're telling me that Shlomo Melech, when it was time for vakesh rachamim, went ahead and used 24 brachos. So why don't we do the same thing today? Why don't we just do 18? Let's do 24. Okay. So Amos Amrinu Shlomo b'Yom Derachme Ananami b'Yom Derachme Amri Lahu. No, so it's not that. No, and it's a very funny half meaning here, but the Gemara is saying Shlomo used the 24 because it was a special day that required rachamim. So too, we only use the 24 on a day that we require rachamim as well. Okay. So let's go over all these things and just get the questions out. So you have Sheva the Shabsa Keneged Me, right? So you have the 7 kolos of David, Okay? Then you have the 9 by Rosh Hashanah is Keneged the 9 Azkaros that Chana did on Rosh Hashanah, and she was remembered. The Zechira took place in Rosh Hashanah. Okay? And the 24 of Tainus, and then the Gemara has this funny thing when the Gemara says, what's the Havamina? Ihachi kol yoma nami namrino. Right? Because the Gemara's answer is no, this was a day of Rachamim. Right? So what was the Gemara's Havamina to say that maybe we should say this every single day? Right? And what's the Gemara's answer to say that no, that Shlomo reserved it for specific occasions, so too that's what we do as well. Okay? So what's going on here? I mean, these have to be explained. Like what's bothering the Gemara? Okay? What's bothering the Gemara? And keep one thing in mind. Whatever the composition is here, don't forget that we're really talking about the first 3 and the last 3 are always in place. You always have the 3 Brachos of Shevach, and you always have the 3 Brachos of Hodah. It's really a question of the Bakasha, or the middle stuff. That's the one that's subject to change. On Shabbos there's only 1, on Rosh Hashanah there's 3, and on Tainus there is 18. Okay? Bakashas. Or whatever. 18 middle Brachos. Right? What's going on here? What's bothering the Gemara? Why? How do you define this? How do you approach such an area? Do you know what I mean? A great question to ask is that 1 second, the implication by the Havamina in the last case is that, 1 second, why stop with 18? 24 seems a lot better, right? Meaning that if I can stuff more brachos in there, legitimately, why not do that? Why not have more brachos, right? That's what you're asking. In other words, it seems like a very rational thing. Shlomo came up with a very good system. Why not Chazal turn to that? Why not you can have even more brachos then, right? Let's just start with Shabbos itself. When it comes, so there's no bakasha on Shabbos. There's no idea of bakasha on Shabbos. Fine, whatever, I don't care the reason why, but there's no bakasha on Shabbos, right? Bakasha doesn't exist. So what can we do with that then? What's the Gemara doing now? What's the Gemara doing? That's to me is the opening. We recognize that on Shabbos, you can only have Shevach. Now, and let me ask you another question. This is a more subtle question, but no one picked up on it, okay? But it's a good question. It's a very good question to ask also. And we'll be able to answer this at the end. What's very funny about this Gemara, so what do we have? We have Shabbos, right? We have Rosh Hashanah, and we have Tainus, right? So, what about Yantav? No Yantav, no Yom Kippur, right? No mention of Yantav, no mention of Yom Kippur. Why not? Why not? No. Oh, okay. We'll see. I would say there is a problem, but it's not. It doesn't fit into what the objective of the Gemara here is. So what? Oh, say it again. When we read the Gemara, we say, okay, well, the Gemara now is saying that, okay, well, when Chazal were Masakin Shmona Esrei, the regular Amida during the week, so they found the 18 existing in Tehillim. Okay, then when they come along and create Tefillah on Shabbos, they have to find a source for that. And then when they come along and create the Tefillah for Rosh Hashanah, they got to find a source for that. And then when they come for Tainus, they have to find a source for that. Okay, that's one way to approach the Gemara. But if you approach the Gemara that way, you can't answer the question of why they didn't include Yom Kippur and Yantav. So they should have been on the list. The Chazal should have showed us every different type of tefillah where they get the source from. But I don't think that's what Chazal. I don't think that's what the Gemara is trying to tell you. Okay, what the Gemara is trying to tell you is a very similar idea, by the way, to Shabbos and Yantav, but not in the realm of tefillah, in the realm of kedusha. It's a famous thing there's a famous idea brought down. I think the Rav said it, but there's an idea that Shabbos is, because it says a Shabbos is considered a moed, right? As well as but it's not really a holiday. We don't consider it like a yantiv, right? So it shares the quality of moed, but yet it's its own. It's a separate type of day. In fact, the themes of Shabbos have nothing to do with the themes of yantiv. So the way it's normally answered is that Shabbos was really the blueprint for Kedushas Hayom. In other words, God set up Shabbos. And then from Shabbos was the blueprint for all other Kedushas Hayoms. Okay, if that's such a word. all other sanctity of days emerged from Shabbos, meaning that Shabbos was the template for the entire system of Kedusha that emerged from it. So Yom Tov is really Shabbos with a modification. Yom Kippur is Shabbos with a modification, right? That's what's happening here. What's happening here is the following. In other words, Chazal set up a blueprint, a template of Yud Ches Brachos. Okay, and when it comes to the other days, okay, it's not that they go ahead and say, you know what, now we have to find a different system or a different keneged completely. What every single time is another tefillah, another day, let's say Shabbos comes around. So now they have to take the template of Yud Ches and see how that was going to apply, what they're going to modify from the Yud Ches when it applies to Shabbos. So what do I mean? I'll tell you what I'll give you for example. Let's take Shabbos. Shabbos really does partake of Yud Ches, right? What do I mean? It means that what can't be expressed on Shabbos? Bakasha. But Shevach can. Shevach can still be expressed. So what Chazal did was that they took they took one of the themes that exists in the regular Yud Ches, and they magnified it for Shabbos. Okay, they didn't create a new idea of tefillah on Shabbos. They took the Yud Ches and they said, okay, well, what happens in Yud Ches? You have Shevach, Bakasha, and Odah. But there is no vehicle of Bakasha that exists on Shabbos. So what do? They took the notion of Shevach, right, and they magnified it. If you look at the Tehillim they turn to, the idea of Kol, all the Meforshim say is the Kol is a reflection of Shevach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They all refer to praise of God. So that's what Chazal did. Chazal came along and they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and using the template of Shemona Esrei, we're going to go ahead and in a sense, in that middle section, since Bakasha can't be expressed, we're going to take Shevach and magnify it. We're going to have a greater expression of Shevach that exists in Shabbos. So they're taking the original template, and they're modifying it. They're modifying what that template is. Why? Because the day itself doesn't allow for the normal template to express itself. You understand? And by the way, that's why you don't need to mention Yom Tov by Shabbos, because that's the whole point. In other words, they're showing you that when the day itself, see, let's say Shabbos. Shabbos is a day that the day doesn't allow for the normal expression of Bakasha, right? So what do? They went ahead and they took Shevach and they magnified it, okay? Now what about Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah also is a day. Let me just finish Rosh Hashanah first. Rosh Hashanah is a day where now it's not that Rosh Hashanah is different. Rosh Hashanah isn't a day where Bakasha couldn't exist. I wouldn't say after Rosh Hashanah is. Rosh Hashanah is a day that demands a different type of tefillah. Okay? In other words, what does Rosh Hashanah now contain that you don't have in the normal Yud Ches? Yikes. Let me just follow through with Rosh Hashanah, okay? So Rosh Hashanah is a similar idea. Rosh Hashanah is that there's a certain theme, there's a certain type of tefillah that exists in Rosh Hashanah, right? So the things like this. What is Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is different than Shabbos. Shabbos is where that the day itself does not allow, right? The day itself does not allow for the normal expression of Bakasha. There's no ability to. But Rosh Hashanah is the opposite. Rosh Hashanah is a day where the nature of the Yom is one where a person has to have a greater expression of Bakasha. Right? It has to be. There's a greater idea insofar as who he is. The way he stands before God. It's a different quality. So what do? They took the notion of the regular Bakashas wouldn't do it. Right? It wouldn't do it the regular Bakashas. It's an idea in Pekid and Zechira where man's in a different state. He relates to the Yom as a different type of Yom. It's Yom Adin. So that demands a different expression. But again, it's not a new tefillah. It's like almost in a sense, it's a greater, a different qualitative expression of Bakasha, like a greater qualitative expression that this day demands. So they took the template of Bakasha and they worked off of it. Okay, but again, they're always going back to the template of Shmon Esrei. So when the day demands this, when the day demands such a thing, so that's when they go ahead. So what do? They don't go ahead and start all over again. They take the existing template of Shmon Esrei and they modify it. And that's what they're doing by Shabbos and by Rosh Hashanah. Okay, does that make sense? They only have the right to modify one thing. I said this. They can only modify one thing. They can't. They cannot modify Shevach, and they cannot modify Hodah. The first three and last three could never be modified. Why? Because that's the essence of Tefillah. Tefillah really essentially is Shevach and Hodah. They can never modify that. But Bakasha, that they have the right to modify. Because Bakasha really is, insofar as the scheme of Tefillah, it doesn't have, because again, we know the famous halacha. If a person doesn't have kavanah for his first three brachos, it's a question if he yosei tefillah or not. Why the first three? Because that's really the essence of tefillah. The essence of tefillah is really Shevach. So that they never modified. But my point though is, but I'm saying, my main point though is like this. My main point is that they didn't create a new tefillah of Shabbos or a new tefillah of Rosh Hashanah. Because if that were the case, then the Gemara would have to list Yantav, Yom Kippur, etc. Every time you have a different holiday. It doesn't do that. Why? Because it's just telling you that there's different klalim here. One klal is where a day doesn't allow for a certain type of expression. That's Yantav and Shabbos, right? Another day is a day where the day demands a different type of bakasha. That's like Yom Kippur as well. The same phenomenon that exists by Rosh Hashanah, that same mechanism would apply to Yom Kippur as well. It'd be no different. That's a day where the very day itself demands a different type of bakasha. Whereas by Shabbos, it's that there is no mechanism of bakasha to be expressed. Is that clear? The last one's interesting. Okay, the last one you can't use, and that's why the Gemara is a Havamina. The proof of my svara is the very Havamina that the Gemara has. See, you wanted to ask before, it would seem to imply that the more brachas you have, the better. So why not say this on every day, right? Okay, but in the very question itself, it's an implication. What the implication is, and this is an important point. Remember, Tainus is not like Rosh Hashanah, and it's not like Shabbos, because there's no Kedushas Yom. In other words, there's nothing intrinsically different about the day itself. So because there's nothing intrinsically different about the day, that's why the Gemara is allowed to ask this question. There's nothing different intrinsically in the day of a Tainus. Okay, it's not like Shabbos or Rosh Hashanah, where the very day itself demands something different. There's something intrinsic built into the DNA of the Yom that requires a different expression. You don't have that by Tainus. Okay, so what is Tainus teaching you? See, think about it. There's the Havamina. I think that's what you were asking before, but your question was really what the Havamina is. The Havamina is really saying is that, okay, well, then you can argue that what is the 20... In other words, how would you first look at the 24? The question the Gemara asks is telling you how to look at the first 24. Look at those 24. How would you look at the 24? As its own template. In other words, I have a template of 18, but I also now, it looks like I have a template of 24 as well. So why would I rely on the 18 template when I can get the 24 template? In other words, that's the Havamina. The Havamina is saying is that if you're telling me really there's no difference between the 18 Brachos of Shmona Esrei and the 24 Renanos of Shlomo, right? So then I see in front of me now two blueprints that exist by Tefillah. So why would you ever use the quantitatively less expression of Tefillah? Why not use the 24? You understand? That's the Havamina. The Havamina is saying is that, how do you look at it? You look at it as saying, that's why I asked the question, Ihachi, why not do it every day? Why would you ask that question? Because the Havamina is saying is that, one second, there's nothing different about the day of a Tainus, right? There's nothing intrinsically different, right? And what do we see? There's no Kedusha in the Yom, right? The Yom doesn't demand anything. So, so if that's the case, so why can't I just go ahead and say that use the 24 template? That seems like a better blueprint than 18, right? What, you can get more brachos in. You can get more brachos into the picture. Okay? So what's the Maskana telling you? This is, I think you're going to have to say this, but what's the Maskana telling you? That whereas Rosh Hashanah and Shabbos are din in the Yom, this is a certain situation. A certain situation emerges, like there's no rain. A situation that demands a person to engage, to be in a certain state of mind, right? So what's 24 then? What's 24? This is a different kind of modification. This isn't modifying it, it's simply adding more brachos. It's 18 plus. It's like a supercharged Shemona Esrei. It's just, in other words, what we're saying is that normally when you, this is I think what you were saying before, normally when you engage in tefillah, of course your guys mevakesh rachamim. That's your normal state when you're in bispalel. You want God's mercy. But on Tainus, Tainus demands like a greater expression of rachamim. So that's expressed in the greater quantity of brachos. But that's not a modification in the blueprint itself. You're just adding more. You're taking bakasha and adding to it. It's like you're mevakesh more rachamim. Okay, but that can only emerge on a specific type of day. You understand? So in other words, a certain type of situation. So whereas by Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah, the day itself demands a qualitative modification of the very blueprint of the Yud Ches, whether it be no bakasha, replace it with Shavach, or like a different type of bakasha, which we'll call zichronos, right? That's the first way of learning. Or no, the situation of Tainus means that now I take my 18 and it's like 18 plus. It's a supercharged Shemona Esrei. It's like a more quantitative bakasha, right? But that's not modifying. That's simply building off of the current 18. Do you understand? Why? Because that's the Gemara's answer. The Gemara said the Havmin is saying that's the point. The Havmin is saying is that if you looked at 24 as its own template, right, then I'd agree with you, because then I'd say, 1 second, if I have 24 versus 18, why would I always go with 24? But it's not its own template. 24 is where when man has to be involved in more rachamim, so there's an aver that exists where you can have more tefillah as a result. But it's more of that. It's more of Shemona Esrei. Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah aren't more of Shemona Esrei. They're differentiations in the very blueprint. But this is more of the blueprint. It's more. It's just a greater increase. That can only exist when there's a need for that increase. But that's the point. From a mechanism standpoint, it's just an increase in the 18. It's not a different set of brachos. It's basically just saying 18, and then we're going to add more to the 18. Not that it's a separate set of 24. Do you understand?